Hey, welcome to Pop Goes the Stack, the podcast about emerging tech and the unintended chaos it leaves in its wake. I'm Lori MacVittie, your host, here to translate technology hype into human speak. And to help with that, we've got co-host Joel Moses. Welcome back, Joel.
Yeah, good to be here, Lori.
All right, and we brought some guests along. You notice there's extra. We each brought a plus one. We've got Ken Arora, distinguished engineer.
Hi there.
Ken. And we've got Kunal Anand, our chief product officer.
Hey, everybody. I don't do human speak. I do AI slop.
We're in trouble already. Oh, my goodness. So today's episode, we wanted to talk about reliability, hence the chaos reference. Well, it used to be boring. And that was actually a good thing, at least in operations. The same input in, same input out. It was predictable. Deterministic systems reward discipline. We like that. That's because if something changed, you could trace it, you could diff it, you could roll it back. So reliability was actually a math problem. It was a good thing, right? It was very well understood. Well, inference is here, and it's blowing that up. There is not a good corollary for reliability when it comes to AI inferencing, because slop apparently is, how we're going to phrase that. So we wanted to talk about that. How does it change? It needs to change. I'm going to say it needs to change. You can't measure it the same way. But how does it change and why? And I believe Ken might even argue, no, it doesn't, and we shouldn't. And he's just going to argue because he's Ken. So take it away.
I just an alternate point of view, counterpoint.
That's arguing.
But you know what? Slop seems so pejorative. If I was just working with a human, you might call it creativity.
That's right.
The point is that, one of the really attractive things about Gen AI, the reason it's opened up new areas for humans to interact with AI, with computers, is because of its non-determinism, slop, its creativity, that you can give it the same prompt, ask it the same question. It'll give you different answers, different takes on things. And sometimes, not always, sometimes that's the feature, not a bug. And I guess I'd want to at least make that point of view known. It's like, sometimes it's a feature. Now, where it's not a feature and it's a bug, I think we do need to do things about it. I don't know, Joel, any thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you. I think that the term slop is a little pejorative, and actually what we're dealing with here is just a bit of managed variability. It's the difference between a marching band where every drum beat, every step, every trumpet blast is on time, but you can take the same instruments and you can apply them to a jazz band. And what differs is the structure and the timing, and it can be variable and in some cases fairly random, a solo as opposed to a group effort. And there's nothing wrong with that. It produces different output, and actually what we value in jazz music is the variability. And so I think that calling it slop is a little pejorative. It's actually creativity out of variability.
I'm gonna disagree about the nature of that word, because I make a specific dish and my son calls it crock slop and he loves it. He's absolutely excited by slop. So I'm gonna say context is important in how you're perceiving the value of that word.
Well, one of those little known facts, known here, but maybe not well known, is right. As Kunal is a bit of a musician, as I believe,
right,
and so probably has this music analogy. So it's a little bit like jazz, a little bit like riffing. How do you view, I don't know, is there a music analogy there, Kunal?
I think there's a spectrum of slop. I think on one side you've got classical, which is like everything preordained, planned, down to the note that Joel was describing. And then on the other side, you get, bands like Fish, like the Grateful Dead, who will just go off and do whatever on the other side. And I think there's beauty in both of these things. I mean, when you think about how technology has progressed, and this is more meta, but these accidental discoveries that have led to very big breakthroughs, you couldn't have gotten there just by being very strict. You needed to explore the studio space, right? At the same time, if you are all the way to the opposite side, where it's just maximum openness and maximum creativity that's unconstrained, you don't end up actually, solving the goal, or you don't end up, in a hill climbing algorithm actually like kind of like climbing the hill per se. So I think there's a spectrum, and I think there's some use cases that require you to play classical, and then there's some music or some use cases that sort of require you to play jazz or to be, a live, I don't know what you want to call fish anymore today. I don't want to say
Jam band, I guess.
jam band, I guess. I don't
Sure,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. We should have a separate conversation on jam bands. It's a separate thing there. But I don't know. It's a beautiful time right now, actually, to be making things and building things. But I agree with you. I think this is a really important topic on reliability.
Yeah. And I think, and you're hitting on it, and Ken hit on it before, right? That word context is important. Sometimes you want the creativity, you want the jam session, you want the practice, you're composing, you're figuring it out, you're exploring a domain or a space. And so you want a lot of variability and a lot of unreliability at that point. But when you're putting this into the context of something like agentic AI, which a lot of people are, that's more task oriented. I have a thing I need you to do. Variability there can be bad.
Sure.
You don't want to end up, booking flights to the wrong place in that flow. You want consistency, at least in behavior. And maybe that's where we're headed, is behavioral based reliability.
Yeah, definitely semantic consistency is what you're aiming for. So if you're doing something like vibe coding, you want the semantic consistency to have a wide berth, to give you lots and lots of ideas. If you have an AI system that is supposed to be a support bot, you probably don't want it to go have an immense semantic corridor to work inside. You want to be as precise as possible. Now, there's always going to be variability in these systems. If you ask if you take out a support ticket as a customer, one day, the system might tell you, sorry for the trouble, we'll fix that. The next day it might say, have you tried turning it off and on again? That's my classical one. The next day it may offer you coupons for free technical support. And those are all within the confines of semantic consistency. Now, if it says, well, let's send you to Hawaii, it's not a travel agent. And perhaps you need to analyze what your system is doing there.
Or
on the flip side,
I
know that our esteemed leader here is a vibe coder, and he wants a fairly wide berth for obtaining ideas from the system, right?
Right. A lot of it depends on context. When you were talking, it made me think a little bit about, sometimes we conflate these two concepts. Consistency. Do I get the same answer over and over again, even if semantically, versus accuracy? Is it the right answer?
Right.
And those are both important things to think about. And you might have different solutions you can get consistently the wrong answer. If I keep going to New York and they keep sending me to Hawaii, is that a problem?
Depends.
It sounds like a lifestyle decision, honestly.
Was it free? Then it's probably, then I'm okay.
But I was just going to make that point. And then even context. I mean, the context is hyper-personal. The vibe coding is a hyper-personal thing. Kunal is an experienced programmer. He probably gives it more latitude and might want to explore what are the patterns that are used for this. On the other hand, if I'm using this in the context as let's say a fresh out of school, or I'm just teaching somebody how to program, I'm probably going to give it a more narrow set of things. It's I think earlier you alluded to, Joel, about guardrails. Now, those are, I think, important, but how do you do semantic guardrails is an interesting question.
That's a fantastic question, yeah. I mean, these systems have drift. These systems have variability built into them. Guardrails get pretty tricky when the target keeps moving.
So I think there's a place for guardrails, which is, being as close as you can to the model. But then when you start to compose systems and agents on top of these models, I think you have a different technique that you have to go through, Evals. And I think when you kind of look at the world today, there's not a lot of people that know how to build these sort of flows and test acceptance criteria or evals around these models before they get their workloads into production. And that's where things kind of go awry. Having built like a multi-agentic thing at home, I was building something that was built on top of visual language, a VLM, basically a visual model for producing, data object classification. And I wanted to take that first output, which was tell me what's in this photo, and then based on what's in the photo, like go down a decision tree. But if that first classification is wrong, you're completely off the rails.
Right.
Right. And so in order for me to like build reliability into the overall system, I had to build all these evals that I wasn't planning to build, because I was having to like effectively wrap every place where the output would have to go to something that would end up either making a decision or following a decision tree or some complex logic. And that was something I was totally unprepared for. And by the way, I think that's like a domain that is going to absolutely open up in the next like 1 or 2 years as people start to deploy more and more of these systems, and as agentic becomes real. I mean, I think there's a lot of hype around this right now, but as it becomes real with like actual orchestration systems, I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see, whether it's bottoms up evals that the community produces, but I think it's so context, and we've said that word a couple of times now, so context specific based on the application that you want to embed these agents or these workloads into. So knowing how to build an eval, knowing how to construct it, knowing how to determine whether or not it's a quality eval or if it's just noise in the system, I think that's going to become super duper important.
Right.
So test is prod and prod is test. I mean, it's all collapsing into the same thing. Like the code, right? When you're vibe coding, right? The coding pipeline is sure it still exists there, but when an agent is vibe coding, now it's in production. Now you're right. The pipeline's moved. It's someplace else. You almost have to collapse this whole thing into the singularity that will be the data center. Which is a scary thought.
Yeah, we talked extensively about evals in our section on availability, our podcast on availability that just took place. Because availability is about correctness as well as responsiveness in the PAR triad that Lori has so lovingly crafted about application of availability and application delivery in the era of AI. Also correctness is a part of consistency. It's a part of the semantic categorization that you have to go to ensure reliability. So.
Right, but the problem is that as we're moving toward that, away from understanding what correctness means in a traditional world, now we have inference, and we're talking semantic consistency, which means, does it mean the same thing? Did it produce a similar outcome? We don't have methods for that. Folks are looking at, how do I support all this inferencing and build out infrastructure to support it and to secure it? And they're saying, I don't know how to establish semantic consistency. There's no measures for it. There's no reasonable systems that tell me what that is or what I should be looking for. So they're kind of caught in this, limbo, right? They know they need to do something, but they don't have the tools yet to do it. So I think defining something, how do you measure semantic consistency then? How are we going to do that? That would be the first step.
So I think this is a real exciting. There's work going on as talked about inference, right? The overarching topic today. How do you do it efficiently, right? So some of these techniques say, well, I'll ask a bunch of different LLMs, inferencing engines, and then I'll have another inferencing engine or a set of them to make decisions. And you can imagine what that does to latency, cost, power usage, everything else. A different tack, and I'll say it when it's applicable, I would encourage people to think about this. Can you place structure on the outputs? Can you make them quantifiable, in which case we can use traditional distance metrics? Can you make them structured? Can you tell an LLM, summarize this in 3 bullet points? And now you've got, you're solving a more constrained problem.
Yeah.
And that's something I think that's a bit of just tactical advice for people doing this today is if you're worried about this and you want to build guardrails, can you structure the output of the LLM or your AI agentic system to be amenable to the sort of guardrails you're used to building?
This is an open question, which is how possible is that when you've got these very large scale foundational models by these large labs that are so inherently capable of doing so many things, that have their own unique system prompts. And even though you could try to influence the behavior of this thing, it could totally still go off the rails, right? Because you didn't build it, you didn't write it. So how possible is it to do it with one of those And are we just like a year away or
Yeah.
months away from, to your point, like these maybe smaller models or more focused models that aren't necessarily built or trained by these organizations or by people, but they're somewhat general purpose, but they're not too dangerous. They can't go, and hallucinate
Yeah.
so crazily, or we've got some improvements elsewhere in the system where they can't go off on its own and do something crazy, and it's just more constrained. And so like
Yeah.
inherently less capable model, more constraints versus very large frontier foundational model that's multi-trillion parameters and can do
That's
anything you want.
a really good point. And actually that brings up something else, which is people's definitions of reliability and consistency may be different. Like some people may want reliability or consistency in how much they pay for the actions of the AI models. When you have a lot of variability in the system over time, you pay for tokens generated over time. You don't pay for the number of calls that you make, period. And so it's like paying for parking by how much coffee you drank while you were parked. So how do you drive consistency into a system that has inherent variability built into it? It's going to have differing costs over time based on how it generates. So if you're trying to get drive reliability into a system, you may want reliable cost over time. So
Totally.
honestly, the definition of reliability could be different depending on what your target is.
Yeah,
More.
and I was going to say, so some of the data coming back from our annual survey, when we asked about the techniques people are using with those, right? Specifically trying to understand what are they doing themselves. And the top answer for how they're basically adapting models was multi-model chaining and orchestration. So Ken's example, we're going to use most of them. The second top answer was distillation. So they're distilling models. And the third top answer was prompt engineering and templates, which I've heard all three of these kind of solutions, right? The guardrails are in, right, prompts, templates, they're just loaded,
Sure.
right, at system time. So all of these are in there. So people are already trying to figure out how to make the models do what they want to do, which is really an effort to be more reliable. Like I want consistency. How do I get that? And we can't rely on the stock model, so we have to do something. And it looks like they're trying all the things right now.
There's something you brought up earlier, which is prod. Um, here's a fun little twist for this conversation. Is there's when you like reliably or guaranteeing reliability in staging or in a dev environment means something totally different when you get these things into production.
Sure.
And
That's
so like
true.
how do you do it? And so I think maybe now it makes more seriously, like it makes more sense now, like maybe you need to actually have the entirety of the production data set or the universe of choices that could come in as input into these models. Like you just need more of that in your dev staging environment, and like your limited data set or what you play with in staging isn't good enough anymore because it's the Wild West.
It works on my machine, like now applied to the entire environment. Like, well, it works in my environment. It's your problem over
Right.
there. I don't think we're gonna solve this today. Unfortunately, it would be cool if we could. That would be awesome, but I don't see that happening. Except that we need to do something. It is changing, and how do people adapt to that? So, what would you leave people with to think about as they're trying to figure out how do I deal with the fact that it's not reliable at the moment, or enforce that or measure it, all these things, like it's changing. What do they need to do? What should they take away other than slop is good? I'm just going to throw that out there. Slop is good is a takeaway.
So I'd start with the takeaway is think about your problem and how much slop/creativity do you want? How much variability is appropriate for what you're doing? And sometimes it's a feature, and when it's not, I'd say think about how can you constrain the problem, and the tools you have might be the prompt. That's the most common tool. Constrain. And so if you can't play with the models, Kunal said, then constrain the prompt, make it something more amenable to the guardrails, and apply guardrails to that.
I can't wait till these systems have a slop knob that you can turn up to 11. That would be pretty cool. My takeaway is, variability in these systems is actually part of their design and part of the beauty of their design. And so don't think that, same prompt, different answer is an unreliable system. It's not a bug, it's jazz.
I'm gonna go with what was the Anchorman thing. 60% of the time, it works every time.
Exactly.
No, I think it's more along the lines of like what Ken and you both you, Ken and Joel, what you said. I think know your problem. There's some places where shelling out to an AI or prompting an AI makes total sense, and you can get away with whatever output kind of comes back. But know your domain, know your problem. If you are really worried about the boundaries and you really are worried about hallucinations having a side effect or having an unintended outcome or something that happens that you're just worried about, apply guardrails, apply evals to better know what the model is capable of before you can get this thing into production. We didn't even get to talk about my favorite technique, which is like using multiple models with each other to double check each other's work. That's fun. And so like there's all sorts of fun things that you can start to do. But yeah, it's a fun time right now.
It is fun, and it's moving fast. It's every time I see the data, it's just like, yep, it's rolling along, it's rolling around. It's already here. It was last week. We're on to the next thing. So it's very exciting, and it's awesome, and things are changing, which makes it exciting because we're going to see new ways to do things, new solutions, new approaches, right? Something new always comes out of that you didn't think was possible or necessary before. So an AI will probably help find that solution, which is unironically ironic, I guess. But in the meantime, yeah, know what you're doing, right? Define your problem and use the tools that you have at your disposal today. Right now, nobody can measure reliability, but there are tools to help you intercept, look at the prompts, look at the responses to be able to judge it outside the flow. Maybe you can't do it in real time, but you can get an idea, right? Is my system acting like a chatbot, or is it trying to send everybody for a free trip to Hawaii? And if that's your system, let us know. We want to get in on it. So that is a wrap for Pop Goes the Stack. If your stack is still upright, celebrate by subscribing and maybe mainlining some caffeine. We'll see you next time for more hype translated into human speak, and subtitles will be included for the carnage.